Hi guys. Okay, so we're going to go to reasoning. So the fallacy detective seminar is what we're going to be in now. Okay, first of all, we're going to review all the fallacies that we've covered so far. So red herring, that introduces an irrelevant point. It's trying to avoid the question, typically is how we see that. Special pleading, it is an unjustified exception for ourselves. Remember that we're making an exception of why I broke the rule. Ad hominem is it attacks a character, the motive, instead of disproving the argument, it attacks the character or a motive of the opponent. Genetic fallacy, it's condemning an argument from its origins, where, how, or who began it. Tu quoque, the you-too fallacy, dismissing someone's point on an issue just because they are inconsistent in the very thing. And we can see that a lot in political debates. Also ad hominem. Instead of trying to disprove the argument, they attack that character or the motive of their opponent. So you can see those two fallacies in current events now, especially when elections come up. So we will definitely see those come this fall around the presidential election in November. Okay, faulty appeal to authority. So this is an appeal to someone who has no special knowledge in that area being discussed. So we wouldn't appeal to a plumber to fix our car problem. Or, I mean, we could, but it would be in a faulty appeal to authority. The next one is appeal to the people. This is claiming a viewpoint is correct because many people believe it. And we see that in today's current events. Just because many people are doing it, it's correct. Just because many people believe it, it's correct. I personally think that's a lot of the belief in evolution. A lot of people believe it, so people are accepting it as so. When it's actually a fallacy in that, when it's appealing on that. Okay, let's go to straw man. Let's see. Changing or exaggerating an opponent's position to make it easier to refute. So you change that or you exaggerate this, and then it's easier for you to refute that point for your opponent. Okay, let's go circular reasoning. So circular reasoning is when one restates the point of an argument just using different words. Okay, so just bringing it back around, just changing it up a little bit. Equivocation, it's changing the actual meaning of a word in the middle of an argument. So if we have this word has two different definitions depending on the context, and in the middle of an argument you use both of those contexts, that is equivocation fallacy. Appeal to tradition. This one encourages action by associating things with the past. So when we appeal tradition, if but we've always done this. This is how they used to do it in the good old days. That can actually be a fallacy if used incorrectly. Okay. Let's see. Actually, I put that in there, and that's not in there yet. Appeal to tradition is not in there yet. Sorry. So let's do loaded question. There's two questions in one, but one is hidden. We looked at the appearance in court when the attorney was trying to catch the witness in trying to trip him up, and he asked two questions in one, but the witness didn't realize that. Didn't ask himself, what's the question in the question? Is there another question in this question? So if it's two questions in one, but one is hidden. Okay, slippery slope. This assumes if we take one step, and nothing is going to stop us from taking a series of other steps. So if this happens, then it's rest assured that all that's going to happen. That's the slippery slope. Okay, part to whole. What is true of the part must also be true of the whole thing together. Assuming that, so these are assumptions, assuming that can actually be incorrect by just knowing the part. And then opposite of that, whole to part, what is true of the whole must also be true of its parts. And I think I used the example of a basketball team. Say we say the Lakers, you know, because the Lakers are having a great winning streak, that everyone on the Lakers must be a fantastic ball player. Well, the Lakers are as a whole, but that doesn't mean that every one of them possess the exact same skill level. Okay, so let's do either or. Either or is a fallacy when someone insists that we must choose between only two things when there are in fact more alternatives. So if it's either or, but there's other options, but they don't say those other options, if it's just either or, that's where the either or fallacy comes in. But if it is just either or, there can just be two options. That, not to say that that can't happen, but if there are in fact other alternatives and someone says it's only these two, that's where the either or fallacy occurs. Okay, generalization was our next one. Okay, a generalization takes a sample from a class of things using characteristics from that sample. It says something about everything in that class. Now, they cannot be certain. That's something about a generalization. It is a generalization. It's not a certainty, because they're taking, example that I used last week was all Challenge A'ers are geography wizards. Now, we know that Challenge A'ers across the world in CC, they study geography intently. So, but you cannot say, it's a generalization to say they're all wizards. But generalizations can either be strong or weak. That's where the fallacy comes in. If they're strong, it's not a fallacy. If it's weak, that's where the fallacy comes in. Because the weak one, like I said, would be they're all wizards. A stronger generalization about Challenge A'ers would be all Challenge A'ers study geography pretty intently. So we can see that as the sample, our class being Challenge A, or a class could be salesmen, or our class could be horses, depending on whatever that class is. It's not just a school class, it's whatever that group is. Okay, hasty generalization. Now, a hasty generalization is where a fallacy can occur, or does occur, because it's generalizing upon a class whether you're taking too small or too poor of a sample of that class. So if we talked about the eating habits of Italians, but we only took a sample of Italians that live in America, this is the one our book gave us, you can't assume that, so we say we watched Italian Americans, and say we watched 100 Italian Americans, Italians that live in America, what they ate. And then we make the generalization of all Italians eat spaghetti for dinner. Well, Italians don't just live in America. It's a huge world. They live in Sicily, they live in Italy, Malta. You're taking too small of a sample to make that statement. So that would be a hasty generalization. There would be so many things you'd have to take into account. Where they live, for one. Are they on a diet? Are they, do they even like Italian food? Just because you're Italian, you may not like Italian food. So that would be too small of a sample. We would have to broaden that to make that a strong generalization. It would be a hasty generalization. Okay, analogy. This is what we talked about this week. Analogy and weak analogies. So analogies are when we compare items. So when we had our class on analogies in the fall, we looked at different ways to compare two items with each other. And it's either a strong comparison or a weak comparison. So I'm going to read the example in the class because I'm going to come back and use it in a minute. So Bert says, my dad just bought a new car. It's a Ford. And Clyde says, oh really? My dad just bought a new Ford a few months ago. What size engine does yours have? Bert says, it's a V8. Clyde says, ours is a V8 too. What color is it? Blue, says Bert. So is ours, says Clyde. Boy, our cars are a lot alike. ours drives very fast. I wonder if yours does. And Bert says, I don't know yet, but if our cars are so much alike, our new car must be fast too. So they're reasoning by analogy. Now, you have to kind of, to make that stronger, you would have to know a little bit more in comparison. So what if we did, we find out that they're both Fords, we know they're both blue, and they both have a V8. That's going, oh, well, then they should both be very fast. But if we actually found out one was a small car, Ford, but one was a huge double four-door pickup truck. Okay, that car is going to be much faster because it's so much lighter than that pickup truck. So we'd actually have to have more information. One would be fast, one really wouldn't be that fast because of the weight that it carries, even though they carry the same engine, even though they're blue, even though they're Fords. So that could be a weak analogy, just not having enough information there. Because we can never really know if our analogy is correct. We're just kind of basing it on an analogy. And the fallacy would come is if we said, because of this, it is true, it would be weak, not strong. And we want our analogies to be strong, so we have to have enough information. Now we're going to compare an analogy with a generalization. So a generalization, remember, is we're going to take a sample and then draw a conclusion about that class. Okay, so we find out some facts of this class and then we draw a conclusion basing it at all. But it's not certain, because anything that would defy that makes that generalization, it voids it. So we're an analogy, we compare two items and then we draw a conclusion about one item, like the Ford. So Bert was saying, well, I don't know if it's fast, but because they're so much alike, I'm going to assume they're fast. So that analogy is making this one item, assuming about this one item compared to another item, where a generalization is looking at a class as a whole and making an assumption about that class as a whole. So we, in an analogy, we're looking at the similarities that we've seen between the items that we've examined. And so that's kind of how they are alike and they are different. So this week you are going to read lessons 26, 27, and 28, and you're going to look at post hoc ergo propter hoc. Okay, so that's Latin. It'll tell you what that is with our Latin students. You'll know what that is. I'm not going to tell you that. Let you figure that out. And then you're going to do proof by lack of evidence. So those are going to be the two. You're going to cover those two over those next 3 chapters. You're going to read those and then complete their exercises that go with them. Your mom, I don't know how your mom does it. I have Jackson write those down in a notebook and answer those. And then after he's finished, he can check them in the back with the key in the back. Okay, and then also look around and see if you can find these fallacies that we're talking about and kind of labeling them and identifying them, because that's the whole goal here, that as we become stronger and further in our education, we want to identify these things we're learning, not just learn them and store them in our brain. We want to be able to use them and identify them in the world around us. So, okay, that is it for reasoning. We will see you in the next video. Bye.